South Carolina versus Kentucky, or it's actually Kentucky versus South Carolina. But potato is what Soar says.
Potato, fire the warning shot. Yes.
Go ahead, Soar.
Alrighty, so Kentucky so far in their week 1 game, Brock Vandagriff had a pretty good debut, going 12 for 18, 169, 3 touchdowns and 1 pick. That was side little tangent. It was a very common stat line for a lot of quarterbacks because Quinn Ewers also had 3 touchdowns and 1 pick, but that is besides the point. Rushing game, pretty well spread. You had lead rusher Demi Sumo for 8 carries, 59 yards, and the solo rushing touchdown. And then behind him was Vandagriff with 5 rushes for 35 yards. On top of the run game being spread out, so was the receiving game. Jay Macklin, 2 catches, 66 yards. Dane Key, 3 for 60. And then Baron Browning, 4 catches, 28 yards, but 2 touchdowns. The defense is really where they shined because even in college, it is quite difficult to still shut out opponents. They picked off Dante's old boy, Rodemaker, twice and kept him to 131 passing yards. They also
I'm glad he's kept by Tate.
That is fair. They also kept lead running back for Southern Miss, Ethan Crawford, to 3 carries and 10 yards, but allowed a total of 5 rushing yards at the end of the game due to Rodemaker being sacked twice for 15 yards. South Carolina, on the other hand, their opener was less than ideal if you are a Gamecock. I'm going to specify Gamecock so I don't get canceled. Anyways, battle against Old Dominion. You're looking to replace Spencer Rattler, Xavier Legette. You know, you've lost a lot of pieces. And quarterback Lenora Sellers was 10 for 23 with 114 yards. Not what you're looking for. You're also not happy if you're looking at the rushing game, because the rushing game and Raheem Sanders is kind of what kept it's what kept South Carolina in the game. Raheem Sanders got 24 carries for 88 yards. And the quarterback, Sellers, he had 22 rushing attempts for 68 yards and a touchdown. This man had 1 more passing attempt than he did with rushing attempts. That's something you don't want to see with your quarterback. The defense did help. They picked off quarterback Grant Wilson twice, and they kept him under 200 passing yards. I will say the bright spot for South Carolina's defense is true freshman Dylan Stewart.
Oh my god,
that dude looked like a 5th-year senior. Like, I'm not saying he's going to be Jadeveon Clowney, but the way that man was coming off the line, that it gave me flashbacks a little bit. Dude was quick. That was Dylan Stewart. Keep an eye out on him for all season. Dude had 1.5 sacks and just was explosive off the line.
Sheesh.
If you're a South Carolina fan, throw all the NIL money. Make sure that dude never leaves.
Yeah. You gotta keep
reasons why South Carolina could win. They're still trying to find their identity. Like I mentioned, Spencer Rattler, Xavier Legette, a couple others are gone. It's going to have to be up to, unfortunately, true freshman Dylan Stewart and the defense to keep them in the game and make Vandagriff feel pressure. He didn't really feel that against Southern Miss. Wasn't sacked much. Wasn't a lot of pressure happening.
Y'all want to see Dylan Stewart after 1 year of South Carolina's strength and conditioning program?
It's just Justin Flo. Oh my goodness. Huh.
It's not fair.
Yeah, that was the number 2 edge in the class, by the way. Just letting that be known.
Yeah. He was insane the other day.
Yeah.
This is all quarterbacks in the country right now. They don't need a cigarette after you get done blowing him.
I'm getting cooked.
Just temper your expectations.
Yeah, it is Old Dominion, but still, even against bad teams, you still want to see something, especially from your true freshman.
Shout out to Tyree Wilson. I know he's in the NFL, but I always got to throw a dig at Tyree Wilson.
PTSD. No. But yeah, so South Carolina's just going to have to establish a passing game. You need Sellers and the receivers to get on board. Another true freshman that we didn't really see at all is Nick Harbor. You know, you're kind of hoping
he's a sophomore.
Or sophomore, yes.
Yeah.
Correct. Not freshman. But yeah, either way, you still didn't see him, though. And you're hoping that you can incorporate the speed and just him in general to your offensive schemes. Open up the defense a little bit. See if you can get behind some zones. Do whatever. Another thing, and this is wishful thinking, but it does happen, especially in college. you got to hope that Kentucky is looking forward because they have Georgia up next. So you got to hope that they're not really paying attention to this game and they're more so game planning for Georgia so you can catch them on the surprise. Very wishful thinking, but we have seen it happen in college. But I don't think that's going to happen because here's why Kentucky will win. They just looked better. I mean, simple as that. They really just looked better in all the phases. Kentucky's going to have the home field advantage. They're going to start SEC play before Georgia, so you know they're going to take that serious because Georgia is, Georgia. What better to start off against either South Carolina or Mississippi State or Florida for SEC play? Guess what? You just got South Carolina who struggled against Old Dominion. Congratulations. Welcome to the SEC play.
Yep.
You just have to keep the same game plan of Brock airing it out, mixing some of the run game, establish your two backs. Brock has his legs. He can use it. And if O-line can handle Dylan Stewart, should be no reason why Kentucky does not win this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. So put Kentucky on the map for Sora. Kali.
One thing that I think is really important to note for Kentucky, whether you look at it for stats or snap counts, preparedness going into the first SEC game, is that they did not even play 3 full quarters of football against Southern Miss. The game was called early with 9 minutes left in the third quarter due to inclement weather. So
yeah, it was delayed till what, like 9 o'clock? And they were like, we got work in the morning.
And they just called it because the game ended with Kentucky on a 2nd and goal on Southern Miss's 5-yard line. So they were about to score again. And it was already, 31-0 in favor of Kentucky. So they were thoroughly dominating. And that was in, 58% of an actual full game. So you're looking at a team that, and statistically, right, you look at the numbers for like Brock Vandegrift, the rest of that offense, they did all of that in like half a game, roughly, just over half a game. Yeah. So that's very impressive.
These aren't even like the full stats.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think that's pretty impressive. But then at the same time, you also have to consider they're going into this game against South Carolina with roughly half the amount of snaps that South Carolina is played. So they don't have as many like real like live snaps under their belt compared to South Carolina going into this matchup. Now, granted, like Sora, like you said at the very end, Kentucky looked far better holistically in those snaps that they did have compared to South Carolina, right? Kentucky took care of business over Southern Miss. They got their new receiver transfer from North Texas, 𝗎𝗫 Macklin, cousin, I believe, of Jeremy Macklin, former.
I read that and I had to do a double. I had to because it just said Joy Macklin short on Google. I was like, wait, hold, what?
Yeah, they are
straight up. I read that as Jeremy Macklin, and I just went, "Oh God, oh PTSD." No,
yes,
good old days.
𝗎𝗫 Macklin transferred in after being very productive at North Texas. He led Kentucky in receiving yards, and then incumbent starters in Dane Key and Berrien Brown both were electric when they had the ball in their hands, right? They were able to get a ground game going. So I was pretty impressed with Kentucky and how they played. South Carolina, not so much. The running game is going to be a prominent feature of their offense, especially with Raheem Sanders transferring in from Arkansas and the running ability of Lenora Sellers. However, Sora, as you mentioned, the passing game was virtually non-existent.
It was atrocious.
So they need to step that up because, I mean, Kentucky has a very solid defense, right? They picked off Tate Rodemaker twice, and they have studs in the front seven. Deion Walker on the interior looks like he could be a first-round draft pick one day, right? Jamon Dumas-Johnson, the transfer from Georgia at linebacker, had a great game, again, in the limited snaps he did play this past weekend. And on the flip side, right, the only defensive standout that South Carolina had was Dylan Stewart, right? You talked a lot about him. If y'all haven't, go watch his highlights from this past game. Dude lit up the stat sheet.
Like we usually recommend
like James Pierce 2.0.
We usually recommend go watch, the full film. There are some players like that of his performance. You can be satisfied of just watching the highlight reels alone and go, yeah, I've seen enough.
Yeah.
Two things could be true.
He was phenomenal. And one more thing I'll add about South Carolina is the offensive line did not do a great job at keeping a clean pocket for Lenore Sellers. I believe he got sacked 4 or 5 times, which is just not what you want to see against an inferior opponent like Old Dominion. When you're facing a Kentucky defense that is generally very disciplined and solid, and this year they have some high-end talent in that front seven, that's a recipe for disaster, especially with a quarterback who didn't even complete 50% of his passes against Old Dominion. I cannot stress that enough. That
it was Old Dominion.
Was so worrying. I was high on Lenore Sellers.
It was down to like the last 5 minutes or so, wasn't it, in the fourth quarter?
No, it was like dangerously.
I'm going to tell you right now, if it weren't for the embarrassment that Florida showed on live national television, this would be talked about a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they may have gotten the win there, but if you're a South Carolina
won the battle,
fan,
they did not win the war.
Yeah, that was a moral loss. So look, just looking at it here, South Carolina put up a stinker last game. I don't care if they won; they did not look good in doing so. The only bright spot was Dylan Stewart. That offense was just pretty pathetic. They go against a much better defense in Kentucky, and Brock Vandegrift and company looked really good, especially considering they only played like 2 1/4 quarters of football.
And the thing that you got to wonder about that, because I know you're talking about like, they played half a game, less snaps than South Carolina. I know that wasn't perfect English, but whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you got to wonder though, if that's going to be more of you got to play devil's advocate a little bit. Is that going to help them or hurt them a bit more?
I think it'll be
South
both.
Carolina's got more wear and tear on the players, but they put up 31 in 2 quarters.
Right.
So
Kentucky
really,
will have less experience under their belt right now, right? They may be a little bit more fresh, but also they have less on film, right? They have a whole game to go off of in terms of film for South Carolina, while South Carolina really only has essentially half a game of film to go off of. So you have a lot of plays, in your pocket or up your sleeve that you didn't put on film against Southern Miss, right? Because you didn't play like a quarter and a half of football. South Carolina has much less to go off of. It can definitely go both ways, depending on how you look at it. But I think holistically, Kentucky should handle South Carolina and you have a comfortable win. But just keep in mind that both of these teams, just with their SEC schedules, they could both be looking at trying to fight for bowl eligibility. And I think that this game will be very important for reaching that 6-win benchmark, primarily for South Carolina. Kentucky should be fine, but South Carolina needs this.
Yeah, man.
They really trademarked Beamer ball for this, huh?
I just I don't think this game is going to be close. And I'm going to just say one thing. Move over DJU. Lenore Sellers is here.
Yeah.
He's not ready, man. I get what they're trying to do with the whole experience, but like watching that game for me, when I had the chance to get back and just really just break it down, missing easy throws should not be a routine thing for a program like South Carolina. Especially having like a Spencer Rattler there and seeing the pretty good throws that he made. And if he was barely winning games with him and Xavier Legette, Lenore Sellers definitely not going to win games when guys like Nick Harbor aren't playing either. So I don't know why they shelved that kid. I don't know with as much talent as he has, but that's a story for a different day. Brock Vandegrift to me looks the part on the other end. I mean, a lot of these guys that we keep talking about that came from Georgia just sit behind guys like Carson Beck sat behind the JT Daniels and those guys like the Stetson Bennett's, and so did Brock Vandegrift. So they were all in the same quarterback room. For him to take a flyer on himself to go to a school like Kentucky, who's been getting transfers from Will Levis to what's his name? Devin Leary to now Brock Vandegrift. This is like the school that you go to. It's almost like last chance you for a lot of these guys. But I think
especially the same thing you can say with the running back room, because Kentucky always they bring in good transfers in the running back game.
Yeah, I don't know about this year. That's yet to be seen. But for Brock so far, is like, to me, he might be the best quarterback that they've gotten so far. Since Mark Stoops has been there. Not sure how I feel about Rocket Sanders yet either. I mean, I think he got severely overhyped last year and he just hasn't put it all together. And I don't think being on South Carolina is going to do him any favors. I know he got 80 yards, but I mean, I didn't see anything amazing out of him. It just seemed like we're just going to hand the ball off to you 1,000 times to see what you do. Doesn't necessarily make you a great quarterback. Now, I mean, you could say the same thing about Amarion Hampton, but that North Carolina team is bad. And he's the only weapon that they really have so far right now. Having a close game against Old Dominion is not a good look. I mean, it just is what it is. Like, it's just not a good look. And your first game of the season always sets the tone for the rest of your season. I'm gonna keep the same energy with the teams like Oregon, but at least their coaches had implied like we could have stepped on the throats if we really wanted to. Even though that's kind of like pumping your chest out from an obvious mistake that could have happened when the team is coming in there playing you hard. But again, you know, Shane Beamer is going to be Shane Beamer at the end of the day. One thing I did want to know, I know we were talking about the running backs from Kentucky, but they need to figure it out who's it going to be. They had 3 running backs with 7 yards per carry in the game. So these guys can run the rock. True. It's just, you know, it's not a bad problem to have, but you got to anoint somebody to be your guy too. I don't.
Especially when you have the history of producing good running backs and always having the one guy, you know, Chris Rodriguez.
You got 3 good ones right now. So a couple questions I asked myself. Can Shane Beamer stop the air game? I don't think so. They're tied 107th on the worst third down conversion defense on 18 snaps. Kentucky ranked 22nd in third down conversion on offense. So what do you think is going to happen? Can Shane Beamer keep South Carolina under 10 points? I'll say put the money on that they can. That's how bad I think that this game is going to be for South Carolina. Jeez. I do not think that this is going to be a good game for them. It's going to be
that they'll keep Kentucky under 10 or that they won't get over 10.
No, that they won't get over 10 points.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right, yeah.
Keep them under 10. They won't go over 10. You know, however you want to slice it. These dudes ain't scoring more than 10 points in this game.
That's fair.
And I would like everybody to come back next week and run me my money.
The only saving grace of this whole thing is, like, we've seen, you know, South Carolina teams have fallen asleep, like last year when they were beating Georgia until the fourth quarter. So I mean, we've seen them sneak up, but
I don't think
Shane Beamer can't control that. I don't think it's going to happen this week.
I think they lack explosive plays from their players, especially if Nick Harbor isn't getting targeted out there. I mean, he had the 4th most snaps out of any wide receiver on South Carolina's team this past week. And if he is their big play guy, because I mean, first of all, he's massive and extremely fast, and he's not actually playing, he's not getting snaps, he's not getting targets, I just don't see South Carolina having a chance if they can't create explosive plays. Also, one other thing to note is that running back transfer from Ohio State, Trip Trayanum, who transferred to Kentucky, is still recovering from a broken hand. So he not only didn't play this past week against Southern Miss, but he is not available for South Carolina, Mark Stoops already said. So, you know, they had 3 solid running backs who averaged over 7 this past week. They haven't even gotten Trip Trayanum into that rotation. So this Kentucky rushing offense could once again be really solid, and like you said, Sora could be another transfer who takes up that mantle.
Yeah, man.
So Ray Davis, the guy from Vandy, Chris Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Chris Rodriguez was incredible on film. So for the rest of the guys, we got a clean sweep of the Wildcats across the board. I don't think this is any surprise. I think this is kind of the lock of the week for us too. If you're gonna put money on any game, you put it on this one because
I don't know. Yeah. I felt like somebody was gonna pick South Carolina.
I did too. I was scared for a second.
I was scared too. I was gonna be like,
I might have to go back and tap that dude on the shoulder and say, you might want to look into this a little bit more than you have, because 107th worst on third down conversion against Old Dominion. Yeah. What do you think about Brock Vandergriff and what they're about to do on offense? It's going to be nasty work.
Yeah.
First degree.
So that's at 3:30.
Shane Beamer's going to walk up to his quarterback. Get up!
Get up! Get up!
3:30 p.m. ABC ESPN Plus.